just last month, there was a drone attack by Iran on a U.S. base in Syria, killed a U.S. contractor, injured our servicemen and women, I think at least 4 or 5. We then responded. They responded back. So we've gotten back into a shooting conflict directly with Iran and their proxies like Hezbollah. And we did hear from this administration that basically the JCPOA, the old nuclear deal, is going nowhere. But now we're learning that the current Biden administration is trying to negotiate a mini deal with Iran. Rick Grenell, who's our senior advisor for foreign policy and national security, former acting director of national intelligence, is joining us now. Rick, this is pretty unique that at a time when they tried to tell us, well, we're kind of done with Iran, and you would think that'd be the case since Iran is making deals with China, Russia, even Saudi Arabia, that this may not be a time to try and deal with them on their nuclear capabilities, that while they can't get a big deal, they're going to work on a little deal which will provide Iran with billions of dollars of relief.
Look, we see so many countries around the world moving away from the United States. When you look at the dollar being mocked, you look at the Chinese, the Russians, we got a whole litany of problems that are being created around the world. And one of the reactions that the Biden administration always does is they seek a compromise, which sounds nice, but this consensus focus is not helping America, does not put America first. And let me give you an example. We in the Trump administration really had the Iranians isolated internationally. And we were very tough in the Trump administration to demand that our allies and others not do any business with Iran, to squeeze them, oil, products. We worked very hard. I worked very hard in Europe, getting the Europeans to get on board. But now that the Biden administration has come forward, they are allowing our allies and others to go around the sanctions and to believe in this dialogue with the Iranians is somehow going to work. They are very naive. And let me just summarize by saying the Biden administration would rather have the Germans and the French and the British all complimenting Joe Biden on how well he conducts diplomacy and applauding Joe Biden, rather than protecting America by isolating Iran. And that's what we're doing right now, is we're allowing the Europeans to come up with a JCPOA light, an interim deal that seeks to engage with the Iranians, trusting them, I would say, to do the right thing. We should have learned a long time ago that they lie, this regime lies, and they are not going to do the right thing, and we need to isolate them.
I mean, Ricky, it's bizarre because at the same time, our military has got, and they actually made this announcement, which they don't usually make about the submarines, that they've deployed a guided missile submarine capable of up to 154 Tomahawk missiles to the Middle East, specifically in a show of force toward Iran. So our military is taking that action, but then you've got the administration and their top advisors. And what always upsets me about this is it's not like, Rick, Iran is just doing this to show good faith. The only reason they would even do this deal is because the U.S. would be providing massive sanctions relief to them. So it empowers a regime that is killing its own people in the streets.
Well, look, it's about money. The Iranians want the American money, which would be billions of dollars that we would give them, and then they would lie to us and pretend like they're not seeking a nuclear weapon. Look, what you just pointed out is the strategic, massive blunder that the Biden administration has put forward. They don't have a plan. So what they do when they want to please the Europeans, they pursue this JCPOA light. Let's talk to the Iranians. Let's try. They put that on one track. And then when all of a sudden the Iranians show themselves and literally the groups associated and funded by Iran start attacking Americans, and an American is killed in Syria, then the U.S. government and the Biden administration has to react, and they say, oh, well, let's send a Tomahawk-filled ship to make sure that if there is some sort of military action that we're prepared. What they fail to see is that they are the ones putting forward this weakness. The Biden team is so weak that they are encouraging Iran to have this bad behavior. If they would stop the negotiations, if they would isolate Iran, we wouldn't be having Iran targeting Americans inside Syria.
And you would think, too, that would isolate Iran on the world stage as well. So instead of what these countries are trying to utilize Iran as a new proxy for them and a new ally. So if they were truly isolated, China wouldn't want anything to do with them. The Russians wouldn't want anything to do with them. Even if they hope they could, it would be not worth it. You know, it would not be worth it economically. It wouldn't be worth it militarily or strategically, especially for the Saudis. I mean, that one alone is really scary considering how much we've invested in their security, but also in having our own assets there for our security. And then they're saying, no, we're willing to also get into a negotiation with Iran too, which, you know, these are long-term enemies now saying, you know what, without the U.S. here, and if they don't have our back, we've got to make other plans.
You know, you and I have talked a lot about the fact that the Biden team really has weak diplomacy, that Anthony Blinken doesn't know what he's doing. He's certainly allowed the Chinese to come forward with a plan in Ukraine. But this is another example when an American is killed inside Iran, the reaction from the Biden administration shouldn't be just the military side of sending a ship. They should also go to the diplomats and they should say, this is unacceptable to have an American killed. We are not going to negotiate with these people while they're killing Americans. Anthony Blinken should go to the Europeans and he should demand an end to these talks because the people they are talking to, the Iranian regime, just killed an American. I can tell you this for sure. If a Frenchman or a German were killed, they would not be pursuing talks with the Iranians. There would be much tougher reaction. The Biden team is too weak to understand that diplomacy has to have muscle. You need diplomats who are tough if you want to avoid war.
I think what a lot of people, Rick, are when they hear all of this, they think, what is the way out? Even if we have a change in leadership in Washington, D.C., because we're getting into presidential election year and talk of these big issues like this, is can we claw our way back to where we were just a few years ago, to where, again, you've got a weak Iran and world powers thinking twice before they cross the United States, and also our allies believing that we've got their back. I mean, just these kind of simple things, but it feels like, you know, keep going down this path and it becomes a lot more difficult to get there.
Well, I agree with you. It's a lot more difficult. And certainly the Biden team is making the next president's foreign policy team, giving them terrible choices and creating a lot more, I would say, trouble for the diplomatic team. But as a diplomat, I still believe that when you can unite the world and isolate, then you can really make some change. And I still believe that with tough diplomacy, you can get the Europeans stop doing trade with the Iranians, certainly could get the Saudis and others in the region. They know the nefarious activities that the Iranians fund and do. And so I do believe that the world can come together and unite and isolate the Iranians, but it takes American leadership.
Rick, as always, we appreciate your insight.